Who Killed Mr. Moonlight by Bauhaus, who took lots of their imagery actually from expressionist films, including a poster to advertise an exhibition way back.
And were actually adopted by the descendants of the Bauhaus movement, weren't they?
But I think vaguely, yes, at one point, yes. But
anyway, you were listening to Widsith and Deal Presents on Phonic FM, and in case you think we're mad, we've done 2 experimental shows, this one and the one before, and the 2 December shows, for those of you who love the storytelling and the early music,
are going to be Christmas specials.
We're going to do a double bills Christmas special of loads of stories and loads of medieval music. But for the rest of the next quarter of an hour, we're going to carry on talking about, and perhaps doing one story on, abstract. And we were just talking about Magritte, an abstract painting.
Yes.
And abstract painting really gets... I mean, you kind of get abstract painting. Would you say that Caravaggio was abstract or not?
Well, not personally, no.
Why not?
It could be said to sow the seeds of it in, sort of the fact that the folds of fabric are meant to represent, sort of various other things. But, well, because it...
How about Goya?
Because it's quite...
there's grotesque in Goya. What makes Goya not abstract, would you say?
Now you're asking. I always get him mixed up with Francis Bacon, it has to be said.
Well, perhaps you better draw a blank over that. I have read, and I wondered whether you'd react to this. This is from another one of the French philosophers who I love so very much. This is from Lyotard. And Lyotard says about abstract is that you don't really get abstract painting, not big time, until you get photography.
I think there might well be some truth in that,
and
yes.
Because photography frees painting from any... Partly they become unemployed, and partly there's a need to then kind of rethink what colour is and representation.
Totally, absolutely.
Would you buy that?
Yes, I would, because there's while you've got painting as something that's almost, in a sense, some portraits could be seen as a very workaday thing, because you're trying to accurately, or at least partially accurately, represent somebody in order to have a record of them, sort of for somebody's dynasty or something like that, or for various records for a civic society. I mean, there's something very kind of like bricklaying almost about that. Whereas once you've got photography to do all this kind of workaday kind of, sort of landscape plans type stuff, then you've got you free visual art sort of from that.
Yes, I probably would
totally.
buy it. I would probably buy it too.
I'm sure it had some
and then it went
relationship.
across all kinds of different mediums. So you get dance, you get...
Yes, and sculpture. I mean, sculpture really, rather than having to look like the human body or a horse and a human body, I mean, it could look like anything. And
I've got something more to say about dance, but you were saying you had something else you wanted to say about happenings?
Yes, well, I mean, apparently there's a happening going on, I think today or something. Well, they're calling it a happening.
No, it was a virtual happening. It was on Radio 4, so it was virtual. Because they'd sold tickets to it.
Well, people knew it was happening beforehand, and
it was a memory of John Cage, who once played music
on a train
yes. in Italy. So they were going to do it in the north of England, but they'd sold tickets, which rather to me spoiled the point.
Well, I think they might have done to some of them, but certainly not the earliest ones. Yes, I mean,
but have you got a quote for us there?
I have, and this is Richard Kostelanetz in his amazing, incredible book, which I heartily recommend, The Theatre of Mixed Meanings. Well, he is a concrete poet and also a critic who used to go around interviewing incredible people, because after the Second World War, I mean, this is painting with a very broad brush here, but after what with the Second World War going off and everything, lots of European artists at the kind of cutting edge and sort of post-expressionists and all the rest of it, they had to get out of the war zone, obviously, as many people did, and many of them went to America to live in exile, and people obviously being really sort of open to fresh ideas there, and sort of a whole pioneer spirit, that kind of really took off. And there were some people doing the most extraordinary things in dance, in sort of performance installation, if I can call it that, sort of like environments where there was all this kind of sculptural visual art going on, and then performances as part of that, either theatre or dance. And Richard Kostelanetz is just a key figure in documenting all of this.
So you've got a reading from the book.
Well, I have just briefly here. He's interviewing Anna Halprin, the dance artist, and he's asking her about a production called The Birds of America. And she says that her concern in this work was for non-representational aspects of dance, whereby movement, unrestricted by music or interpretive ideas, now that's very interesting, could develop according to its own inherent principles. And she says that the compositional approach allowed for group collaboration and improvisation. The music by Lamont Young was a series of single sounds, each surrounded by silence and produced independently of movement. And she says that words were spoken by a child performer, and then after this, long bamboo poles were superimposed on the situation. Dancers were required to hold them as they moved, thus creating an ever-changing visual environment as the poles made their own mobile in space. And this was groundbreaking stuff, because we're talking sort of, I think, 50s and 60s. And she says the inspiration for this was one time she was sitting out of doors for a long time on their sort of wooded dance deck, and she became aware of the light on a tree, a red berry that fell at her side, a foghorn in the distance, and children shouting. And this was very, one of those still beautiful moments, and she wanted to recreate that, but in this wonderful abstract way. And so he really gets to the root of people's inspiration and what's making it, people like really groundbreaking people like Alan Caprow.
So that reminds me a bit of Isadora Duncan and her famous How She...
This is definitely
how she got going on modern dance,
yes.
which was dancing in a museum, wasn't it?
Yes.
She took her shoes off because she was looking at Greek vases.
Yes, and then trying to replicate the music too.
And not terribly surprisingly, they threw her out. At which point, have you got another poem for us?
Well, that was actually a fact brought out by the wonderful New Art Club Dances, sort of one of their productions, all about the history of dance. They brought up Isadora Duncan, who I also heartily recommend. They're quite amazing. But yes, that leads neatly on, because we've mentioned Magritte now and Alan Caprow's assemblages and things like that, to One Speaks of Nietzsche. And this was actually written during a lecture by Dan Smith, so this is another one from a philosophy conference, and where he said, one speaks of Nietzsche's will to power as one speaks of Van Gogh's Cypresses, or Horta's Staircase, Gaudi's Casa Batlló, August Endel's Atelier Elvira, Geoffrey Hill's Mercian Hymns, Ted Hughes's Rain Horse, Stern Oliver's Days, Aylfred's Reign of Learning, Foucault's Power Relations, Winstanley's Diggers, Magritte's Men in Hats, Alan Caprow's Assemblages, André Breton's Parties, de la Rochefoucauld's Maxims, Spinoza's Ethics, Snorri's Sagas, the Herschel's Telescopes, Thomas More's Utopia, Burne-Jones' Briars, Tiffany's Windows, Caligari's Cabinet, Simon's Drink Problem, Carl's Mixing Samples, Robin's Cartoons, Geppetto's Ice Cream, Will's Article, Your Cooking, My Hanky.
So a mixture of semi-mythic and actual events.
Well, that's it. And I'm sorry if that reads like a list of hobby horses, because it probably is.
The
but
problem with us
and
abstract, as you will all agree to, is we can go on for years, probably,
yes,
unstopped.
One could do a whole programme on Kostelanitz and happenings and environments and assemblages alone.
But we've just got time,
expressionism.
more realistically, for some Debussy.